Hi everyone, my name is Kajal and in this video we will be talking about ID generation type table. If you want your ID should be generated from the generation type table, then you have to change the strategy that is given inside your entity to table. And for this person class, the ID will be generated from this table, and for this author we have the generation type as sequence. This ID for author will be generated with the help of sequences. That is again a table present in my database. This ID for this person class will be coming from a table. A table will get generated at the backend, and from that table ID will be fetched up. Stop the previous running instance and I'll just run it again. Okay, because if I go into my properties, you can see the DDL auto as create, so it will first drop everything and then it will recreate it. If you don't know about this DDL auto and what are the options for these DDL auto, you can comment down and I'll create a separate video for this DDL auto. Okay, now I'll show you what are the tables available. So I'll select the database, use unlock B6, and I'll show you what are the tables available in this. You can see the person and author table are there, and then after sequences is there in order to get the ID for this author table. But for this person, where I have defined the ID generation type table, it is generating a table by the name called Hibernate sequences. I'll do describe Hibernate sequences. Hibernate sequences is a table which is by default created. You have next value as well as spring name. I'll do describe sequence. Now you can see the difference between these two tables. Whenever I have a generation type called sequence, at that time you only have next value inside the table. But whenever you are selecting the generation type to be table, by default there is a table which get generated which will have two things in it. One is this next value and one is the sequence name. Now I'll just try to save this data, save this person. Once I click on this send button, you can see the Lena is getting saved and ID is 1. Now I'll do select star from Hibernate sequences, okay, and you can see because I have not defined any sequence name, so by default the sequence name is coming as default, and by default the next value is coming as 50. If you remember, I told you that by default allocation size is 50. That's why this 50 is coming into picture. If you want to make changes, you want to change the sequence name or you want to change the next value which is coming up, you can customize. But by default it will create a sequence name default and next value as 50. I'll go into this author model, and here I'll try to make this as table so that you can understand that is it working for the two tables at the same time or not. Now I'll start this application where author and for person both the generation type is table. Now you can see that it says error executing DDL, insert into Hibernate sequence name is default and next value is 0. For this person, because the generation type was a table, and by default it created this table by the name called Hibernate sequence, and then it tried to put the sequence name as default and the next value is 0. Let's say for person it worked fine. But when the compiler came onto this author, at the same time, it tried creating a table by the name called Hibernate sequence. Because the table already existed, it did not created a new table. Then it tried to insert the same sequence name, default, and next value is 0. But it failed. You can see that insert into this value, this has failed because of this duplicate entry. So that means you cannot use this generation type table with default things in two entities. If you want to use this generation type table, you have to give specific names to the sequences that are coming inside the table. Otherwise, it will just fail. So, what I mean is, if you have, let's say, two tables, one is person and one is author. For both, generation type is table, but inside this generation type table, you have not defined anything. So for both, it is trying to insert the data where the sequence name is default and next value is 0, and it is failing because the row is already present in the table. Like we have the sequence generator, we also have table generator. And in order to use this table generator, you have to define the name first. Let's say this is my table name, but I'll have to define the same over here by the name called generator equals to this table IDs, so that this table generator can work. You can also see inside this table generator you have a lot of things. So you can see this initial value is 0 and allocation size is by default 50. Now you can change it if you want to. So I'll say initial value as 4 and I can say allocation value as 1. Only I'm changing inside author. What will happen in that case? For person, the default table will be present by the name called Hibernate Sequences, and for author, a new table will get generated by the name called Table IDs. I'll try to run this, and I'll do show tables, and now you can see Hibernate sequences are there and table IDs are also there. Now if I'll select star from table IDs, you can see by default the next value is 4 and the sequence name is author. This is my table name, okay, with which I wanted to create the sequence, and for the sequence it is using class name which is author. Now I'll try to save the author by calling this save author. You can see the person has saved and the ID is coming out to be the 5. Now select star from table IDs, you can see the next value is 5 and sequence name is author. If I'll make the same changes for my person, so whatever table generator you have used, if I use it here, table generator, and I'll have to also define the generator, and this is table IDs. Now I'll try to save this save author. Once the data has been saved, you can see select star from table IDs. The next value is 5 for author and next value 4 for person. So what happened? I just saved the data for author since the value has been incremented by 1 for author, but the ID for person is still 4 because we have not saved any data for person. So that means you can have this generation type table. It creates a table by the name called Hibernate Sequences, and inside this the sequence name is coming as default and the initial value is 0 by default and the allocation size for this table is 50. You cannot use the same table for multiple entities because in that case it will fail and says the duplicate entry, but you can define the generator and you can have n sequences inside the table. But inside the sequence you are not defining the table names, you are just defining the next value, and multiple tables can select the data from that table. Yeah, I think that is it for the table. Also, if you want to explore, there is one more annotation by the name called generic generators. So this is kind of a generic generator which you can use whenever you want to put some customization for generation type table. Also, you want to push some customization for generation type sequences. So for that, if I'll go into this generic generator, you can select the strategy. So if you will say the strategy sequence, then this generic generator will provide the customization to generation type sequence. But if you will select the strategy inside this generic generator as table, then it will provide the customization to the generation type table. Yeah, that is it for this part. So in the next part we will be talking about the generation type auto. Thank you so much.